Hey there, you're welcome to TechDev GH, a YouTube channel where we help you learn cross-platform mobile application development easily, faster, using Flutter. Now, we've been having some requests from our lovely viewers to go through the entire build process of WeatherWhiz, right? So our previous video was a speed code depicting the powers of Flutter, as I would put it, right? But then viewers would like a slower video or an explainer of the build process. So shout outs to Rima on making that request, right? So we move to the application. So this is where I built WeatherWhiz. Now with the assets, we define the assets as the developer. You create your assets folder and then you put all your assets there, mostly images, right? So you put the background. I put the background image in the assets folder, the lists icon, and then the search icon here, right? All of that. The fonts folder also developer defined, right? So as a developer, we create the fonts folder and then put in all the fonts we would be using in the application here, right? And then in our pubspec.yaml file, which is a manifest file, which holds all information about the application. So in this project, we are using an ion icons dependency for our icons, and we are using the Intel package for date formatting, right? And you create a new Flutter application, you get the Cappuccino icons dependency, which we'll use for uh, iOS build side. The assets, we reference the assets. So we give the path to our assets folder here and the assets so that in the application you can access the icon, the images in the assets easily. And then we do same for fonts. We define the fonts, the path to the fonts, and then we give the font family a name. And in our case, we've named it SF Pro. Right. So now moving straight into the application, which is the lib, you realize that in my lib folder, I have three subfolders in the lib folder, and one file. Now, the core folder, I use the core folder to keep files that are core to the application. So, such items are the models, the view models, the API services, all of that goes into the core. Now, the helpers folder host utilities that will be used across the application. So you have the constant utilities, you have the keyboard, you have the size configuration, all of that goes into the helpers file. Now the presentation, as the name implies, holds the view, the presentation view, the UI you would see in our application. Then our main file is the starting point of our application. Right, let's go right into the application. Now, our main.dat file, as I said, is the starting point of the application. And in our main.dat file, we have our void main function, which holds our runup, right? Our runup function also. And then our runup actually runs, as the name implies, it runs the application. And in our runup method, we have the material app property or the material app constructor here, right? As you can see, right? And then our material app has the theme, and we are defining the general theme of the application. So in theme data, you pass theme data to the theme property in the material app, and then you can specify the general view or the general theme of the application. So in here, you can define the app bar view, the colors of the app bar, the colors of the text of the app bar. You have the icon theme, you have the text theme, you have, as I said, the app bar theme, you have the button theme, all of that. So in our theme data, you define how various components or widgets in the application should look like generally, right? But in our case, in our theme data, we really define the font family, and then we pass it SF Pro, as you remember in our pubspec YAML file. As the font family name we've given to this particular fonts in our fonts directory, right? So after defining that, I came down to the next property, which is home, right? And this is the starting point or the starting route right? The beginning route of our application. So in home, I passed it the home screen widget, which I created from my presentation directory, right? So home, which is our starting route. So when we open the application on first, it builds or it displays the home screen for us. Right now, let's enter into our core folder. Now, our core folder in this project has only the models subfolder, and in our models folder, we have the weather model, right? And our weather model has these properties. Now, in this weather application, we are going to use data from Open Weather API, right, to display weather data. Open Weather API defines the weather to have an ID, the name, the description, and then the icon, right? So these are basic weather model. Now in our helpers folder, we have the constants, right? And in the constants, we define the constant use of certain properties or certain functionalities in the application. You realize that when we are using, say, a color, we can use the same color in the home screen, in the login screen, in the about screen, in the details screen. So writing that code over and over and over again is not so good, right? Because uh, one thing about clean architecture is don't repeat yourself. Dry. You have to code dry. You don't repeat yourself, right? So we define our color constants, right? We also have our date constants holding our time format, our day format, and then a getter to get the current time. Then we have a method or a function here that returns the day, right, from a date. Have the icon constants here. We've defined all our icons here, and you realize that I use the ion icons dependency, right? And then last but not least, we have the helper constants. So we have the background image referencing the assets, background.png, same for search, same for list. Now, when we come to the presentation folder, which is the main folder that holds our UI view, you realize that I have just one subfolder, which is home, right? And home has a widgets subfolder. Other people also call it a components, right? So we have that subfolder, and we also have the home.start, which is the actual home screen, right? Now, when we move to the home screen, I am using a stateless widget because currently I'm not updating any state. I'm not changing the view of anything at the moment. I'm just building the UI for now. And then in my scaffold, which embodies all the material components, so we have the up bar, the bottom bar, the floating action bar, the drawer, all of that. And then even our body, that's the background layer we get for our application, is all from the scaffold. So our scaffold has a body property, which is the body or the plain screen you see there, right? And in our body, we are passing it a container, right? And the container has a width and a height, but in our case, we are just using the width, right? And then we are saying that the width should take the entire width of the phone. Now, we are giving the container a padding, and in this case, we are giving it a symmetric padding, right? So symmetric gives us two properties, that's the horizontal and the vertical. Now the horizontal puts padding on the left and on the right, and then vertical puts padding on the top and the bottom. So in our case, we've defined a horizontal padding of 32.0, so it means that will be 32 on the left and 32 on the right. Okay, now our container also has a decoration property, and we pass in the box decoration to the container, right? And then we are doing this because we want to pass the image as the background image of our application. So we are making the background image take the entire height or the entire size of the container. So we are passing that background image to the box decoration. Right? So in the box decoration, we have the image property, which takes in the image provider. And now the image provider is a decoration image. And then the decoration image takes in the image property, fit, color filter, right, and many other properties. But in our case, in this application, we're just using these three properties. Now in the image property, we pass in the image provider, which in our case is an asset image, right? And then we pass in the background image. So you realize that we are using the image constant find dot background image is the assets pg dot png. So we pass it to the asset image. And asset image is not the only thing we can pass to our decoration image, right? So in case we have an image we'd have to get from a server or from online, we'll pass in the network image to this image property in the decoration image, and then we pass in the URL here, right? Pass in the URL here, and then it will fetch the image from the web or from whatever server we've passed the URL to, and then we display the image for us. Now that works. So now moving on, we have the fit, right? And this defines how the image should scale on whatever container, whatever widget we are putting that image on. So there are different properties under fit. So there's the box fit dot cover dot contain dot fill dot fit height dot fit width, scale down, all of that, right? But in our case, we're using the box fit dot cover. Now the color filter. Now we use the color filter specifically to parse the background overlay, right? Which are also getting from color constants, right? This background overlay. So you can pass the background overlay as a filter on our image. So that is what gives our image that blue overlay, right? We made that possible by passing the color filter to the image. Great. So now we are done with the container properties, right? So we'll move into the child of the container. So realize that in Flutter there's a tree structure. So a parent, child, parent, child, parent, children, tree relationship, right? So a container has a child, right? And then that child, in our case, is a column. And then a column has children, right? So we can go down the tree, right? So now a column, right, is a list, right? It helps us take a list, right, of items, right? So with the column, we can pass in a list of widgets, and then those widgets will be displayed on our screen vertically. If we are to pass a row, it will display a list of the widgets horizontally. Now we are passing a cross-axis alignment. Now a column has main axis alignment and cross-axis alignment. Now the main axis alignment has to do with the alignment on a vertical view. And now listen to this carefully. Because it's a column, the column's main view or main alignment is vertical, and then its cross-axis alignment is horizontal. For a row, its main axis alignment is horizontal and its cross-axis alignment is vertical. I hope we get it, because the column displays items vertically on top of each other. Row displays items horizontally after each other. So row main axis alignment is horizontal, column main axis alignment is vertical. Right. So we used in our code we use cross-axis alignment for our column because we wanted to center the items on the screen, right? So if we had used them, so yes, so we use a cross-axis alignment to center the items on the screen, right? That's what we did. Now, moving on to our children, the children of the column, right? So we have the size box, we have the top bar, size box, section, size box, body section, size box, footer section, all of that. Yes. So now the size box, I'm using the size box to create some space between each items, right? Now we have the top bar, which is our first component, or our first widget. Now So press Control and then tap the widget, and then it takes us to the top bar. Now realize that our top bar, right, returns also a stateless widget, returns a row of items, right? So it returns a row which has image assets, right? Which is our search. You have the text, which is the time, and then you have the last image, which is the lists, right? The list icon on our far right. And realize that we are using date constants to get our current time, right? So this is the getter we created that returns the current time for us, and then we are styling the text here, right? So in here we are using main axis alignment. So as you remember, main axis alignment for a row is horizontal, right? So the horizontal view, we are creating a space between each items, right, in the row. So when I use main axis alignment dot space between, it will create a space between this image and this text, and create another space between this text and this last image, right? So there are other properties also under main axis alignment. There's the center, which will center all our row items. There's the end, which will take all our row items to the farthest right. There's the start, which will take all our row items to the farthest left. There's the space around, which will create space around each row items. There's the space evenly, which will create an even distribution of the row items in the view. And then there's a space between, which we've used to create space between each row items, right? So we go back to our home. Now we have added the top bar, we create space, and then come and do the city section. Now in the city section, what we are doing is to create a size box, right? So we are creating a size box so that we can constrain the city view or the city section view, right, into a particular width and height, right? And then in our size box, we are passing in a column, right? And then our column will display a vertical view of some items. And in this case, we are displaying the text, which is the main text, right? The city name. So in this case, we have San Francisco, right? And if we are to use the Open Weather API, instead of manually typing in the San Francisco name, we would rather pass in the name of the city. So city name, right? Passing city name. Okay. And then we are creating a space between the text and then the date, right? So here we are formatting a date, right? To give us the day, right? Then the month and then the year. We are passing all of that here also. So this comprises our city section, right? It's quite straightforward. Okay, so go back to the home, and now in the home, we're also creating a space between the home and then the body section, right? And we come to body section. Now in body section, we have a column, right? And then our body section holds icon, right? So whether it's sunny, it's rainy, it's windy, we have that in our body section. Now in our body section, as well as our first item in our column is our icon. So that's it, sunny icon, right? And then we create a space between our icon and then the next item. The next item is the text, right? So I could have done this by using a simple text widget here, right? But what I did here was to use the rich text widget. Now I used rich text widget for this because I wanted to give a different styling, right, for my um, temperature measurement, right? So for degrees Fahrenheit, I wanted to give it a different style, right? So initially, because the temperature itself and then the unit of measurement are on the same line, I could have put it in a row, right? Because I'll get a horizontal view, right, in a row. So I'll get a row, right? I could have done this. If pass in children, and then do a text that holds the temperature, and then another text that holds a unit of measurements, right? So I could have done this, right, and then give it a different styling, right? But you should always know that in Flutter you're not limited to do certain things in a particular way. There are a lot of widgets that does a lot of things. You can tweak your widgets to do what you want, but it's always advisable to use the right widget for the right purpose. So realize that there's a rich text, right? Rich text widget which I can use, right, to pass in my first text, which is the temperature, and then the various subsequent text, which is the degrees Fahrenheit, right? So rich text takes in a text, and the text takes in a text span. That's an inline span. We can also use a widget span, but in this case I'm using a text span because I want to pass in a text. So in a text span I give it a text and then I style it. Rich text takes children, so I can pass in a lot of text spans or widget spans in the children property of the rich text, right? So in this case I just passed in one property or one widget, which is a text span, which holds the unit of measurement, and in that also I gave it a different style. Now we use size box here also to create a spacing between rich text and then the next widget we're going to be using here. Then the next widget is a text widget which takes in a text, and the text says it's a sunny day, perfect for a shopping trip. And realize that I'm using escape sequence here, that's the \n, to move this text perfect for a shopping trip onto the next line. Now there is a property on text which says text align, so you can align your text whether to the center, to the left, to justify, or to the right. Then I pass in the style here, right? So that's quite straightforward. Our last widget or item is the row, right? So our row has these items as the icon, the text, another icon, and then the text, right? So the icon, first icon is the windy icon, which we pass using the icon constructor here, right? So we pass in the windy icon, which we define in our icon constant, right? So air outline icons. Then we give it a size of 22, and then a color. Now we create a spacing between this icon and then the next item. So you realize that in here our size box is taking in a width as compared to our home screen. In the column, our size box is taking a height, and this is because with our column, our items are displayed vertically, right? So top down, top down, top down. So to create a spacing between each item vertically, we need to create a spacing by height. But if we have a row which displays items from left, right, left, right, left, right, we need to create a spacing between them by width, right? So that's why we have the width here. So this will create a space between this icon and then this next. Now our next widget is text that says 3 mph degrees. So that's the measurement for the wind, and we're passing in a text style, right? So you're styling the text, giving it the font size and then a color, or from color constant, give it another spacing, and then we pass in the water drop icon, right? And then another spacing, and finally the humidity, I think 60 degrees, sorry, 60%, right? Humidity for a water drop icon. So that's it for the body section. Now we go back to our home, and then we have the footer section, right, which is the last item on our application, right? So in the footer section, we have first, we are going to create a padding on both ends of the footer section to even compress it more, right? So we have another footer section taking the symmetric, and if you remember, as I stated earlier, symmetric has a vertical and horizontal for horizontal alignment, and then vertical for vertical alignment or padding, right? So you give it a horizontal that's on both ends, left and right, 14 and 14. Now we pass in a row. Now our padding also has a child, right? Pass it a row, and our row has children, and this row is taking a male axis alignment space between. And as I explained earlier, space between creates space, as the name implies, a space between each item, or between each, yes, between each item, right? So finally, we have our children, which holds our footer item. Now, this footer item is not a widget from Flutter, it's a custom widget I created myself, right? So I created this custom widget, which is right here. It's a footer item. Now, this footer item takes in these properties, three, right? And it's the icon data, the temperature, or the icon, the temperature, and then the day, right? And then that is built into our column, which takes in an icon, creates a space, takes in a temperature, creates another space, and then takes in the date, right? And then we are using the date constants, and we are using the format day here to get only the day. So say Wednesday, say Thursday, say Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday, all will be formatted using date constants format here. Now, with this custom widget created, I can pass it here, I can call it here in my row, right? So I have three footer items. First one is taking this icon partly sunny. Well, I've passed in the same properties to it all. They are all here, partly sunny, temperature, and then the day, which is the date.now. So today's Saturday, it will give us Saturday here, right? So that's the footer item. Go back to our home, realize that we've exhausted everything here. So realize that in building this application, at first when I was a beginner, what I had been doing was to cram up everything in here. So you realize that the code I have for top bar, which I've extracted, I will place it here. So you realize that my top bar would end in somewhere line 52, and my city section continues for say line 53 to line 70 something. So realize that my home screen, the lines of code for my home screen will be about to read, helps us write less lines of code, right? So I think that's it for the application for WeatherWhiz. So this is how I created WeatherWhiz, and it was quite simple and quite straightforward because it's just a UI build. Moving on, we're going to work on integrating the application with the Open Weather API, right? And then we'll post that video also, 200 plus, right? But then creating components of each item makes it more easy to you to follow. So kindly follow the channel, subscribe to it, hit on the bell, right? So that we get a notification whenever we post new videos, and don't forget to expect more from us. And if you have any suggestions, if you want us to talk about a topic in Flutter, to build an application, to build something in Flutter, just hit me up on the channel. You find my email in the about section of my channel. You hit me up and we'll get right at it. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for subscribing to it. See you in the subsequent ones.